Hello everybody out there on the internet this week. Like I stated previous in my last video, I was going to upload more content, and tonight is at the end of the 2-week period. I said once every 1 to 2 weeks I would post things, and I decided to, at the last minute on my Sunday evening here, upload some videos. So I just got finished playing a short set of music tonight, and like I said previous, it's just going to be conceptual ideas for right now because I'm not in a band, right? So these are all just concepts for the writing process. What I'd like to talk about really tonight though is about the authenticity of music and how today's musicians don't quite value the history of music and where it's taken people. So when I say that, I say history, I say things that date back to my history and my parents' history. So like 2 generations back, not to the 40s or 30s or 20s or something, just to the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So I grew up in the 80s, right? And the 80s not really known for its music. It had a lot of experimental music in the 80s, but what I grew up listening to was an influence of my parents' music. So the 60s and 70s combined together, kind of. And what I'd like to say is that I get frustrated sometimes when I hear music on the radio. Like, there's a lot of people who are just making tons and tons of money in the music industry, and as far as I'm concerned, they're not really even musicians. And that sounds very dumb to say from my point of view, but like, there's musicians out there who are not writing their own material. They're performing on like a dance platform instead of a singing and band platform, and it just drives me bonkers, you know? Like, there's music that dates to the 60s and 70s that is just like the authentic kind of music that I love and adore. I'm not like a classic music lover, but I just love music that is authentic, you know? Coming from a band or a group of like 3 to 5 musicians who just sit down and hammer it out. That's what you need to do to be a musician in my world. You don't need to be able to dance. You don't need to be able to play like some weird instrument or something, you know? You have to be able to piece in a band for me to consider you a musician. And people like the younger generations that I know would take offense to that, but I even get laughed at as my authenticity to a musician is, because I don't have a lot of experience. I don't have a lot of time playing or touring with bands, but I do have the years put in, and I think that my style and my approach is of the era that I find refined, you know. It's not like people sit down and write music for somebody and then sell it to somebody. People are selling all that stuff online and making tons of money and sacrificing their own creative soul in the process. Like, I would never sell any of my music to anybody. Just for starters here, I wouldn't think to ever do that. I'm too focused on my music to love it enough to just give it away to somebody. It drives me nuts when I think about all the money that is in the industry that's just given to people who are like hacks. Like, there's tons and tons of people. I'm not going to name names here because I just get called out for it online, but like, hopefully people my age or of the era of my parents' age can agree with me that music is just like it's like it's like uh, it's like a runway show or something where they just push you all on the stage and dress you up like models, and then they think, oh, you know, we're great because we have the best set designs, we have the best makeup, we have the best dance squad or something, and it's nuts. You know, I've been playing music for 20 years now or more, and I would never ever ever sell out my stylistic approach to somebody else's money. There's just no way I would ever do that, and hopefully people can agree or comment on stuff like this, and just speak their mind about music in general. There's bands that predate me by like 20 or 30 years, and they're what I draw influence of, not top 40 charts nowadays. The top 40 charts are a joke on the music scene, you know. There's maybe one or two bands in there in the last 10 years that I've even taken a remote interest in. There's been like two bands that have maybe sold marketable music for me to go and see at a concert level, and that's depressing when I think about it. There's music that I grew up in the 80s that was not mainstream, but you could go and see concerts like that when I was younger, and it would be kind of like the underbelly of music. And now it's like there's a big higher expectation of music, but the quality is just down the drain, you know. So I guess this week it's more of a rant about how music affects my perception about the quality of it and the representation, and who is marketable and who isn't, and it just gets my goat. Hopefully people out there who are watching can just say like, yeah, I agree with you, or yeah man, that's totally the case. I'd like to hear some people maybe comment on the fact that I might be onto something here. And I will say I am a bit older, and I guess because I'm in my middle age, it might be hard for for somebody who grows up on pop music to agree with what I have to say, but I shake my head at some of the things that people even consider music nowadays. There's a couple of areas, for example, like there's this EDM stuff, you know, EDM, electric dance music, right? When we were younger as kids, we would listen to something on Much Music. There was this show that came on every Friday or every Saturday on Much Music, and they'd host a half an hour or 45 minutes of dance music. And I'll be honest, when I was a kid, I looked forward to listening to that, and it was quite influence to draw from. But I never once thought about being a DJ or sitting in front of turntables and pressing albums, you know. Like, every kid nowadays who drops out of school or who has shitty grades is probably thinking about going to like some dance EDM festival to get away from their problems or something. And that's absurd when I think about it. You know, people basically used to live for the concert, you know. They used to live to go and see a concert, you know. You'd see it in movies, you'd hear about it like in family friends of ours. You'd hear about people going to see a concert with their girlfriend or their boyfriend or whatever, and that was cool back then. But somewhere along the line, it's just been blown way out of context. You know, people go and they have bad experiences at these festivals. They get dehydrated. They maybe get slipped some kind of drug or something, and then it ruins it for people who enjoy actual good music, you know. Like, there's other stuff too, aside from EDM, you know. There's like the whole aspect of pop music. Like, when I was younger, pop music was this thing that basically you dance to, or, you know, your girlfriend danced to or something, you know. And nowadays everybody wants to be like a high-end pop musician, which is just, I have no idea why somebody would lust after that. My thinking behind this is probably because of shows like The Voice, or all those voice-related competitions they have on TV. That's another thing. The voice-related competitions on TV drive me up the wall, you know? Like, if you want to be a musician, there's other instruments than your voice. Your voice is probably the hardest thing to train in music out of any instrument. It's like the most difficult. There's only about 2 to 3% of the people that actually train their voice are good with it, and the rest of the 97%, including me, are not the greatest with it. So, like, I would like to see somebody target people differently in the teaching mechanisms behind music. You know, you should be able to sit people down and just talk to them and say, hey man, you look like you might be interested in this style of music, or you might be interested in this style of music. You used to be able to tell that by looking at somebody or hearing them practice and stuff. You could say, hey, I bet you they're into that, or I bet you they're into that, or they'd be good in that part there, or they'd be good in that part there. And now it's just a bunch of, like, it's this big ego clash between vocalists, where they like to argue about who's the best vocally. But it just makes my heart go out to people who are basically trying to learn music, you know. If you're trying to learn music, pick an easy instrument to start on. Pick like the ukulele, the recorder. Pick possibly like a trombone or a tuba or something if your kids are in music. Those are instruments you will learn on, and they're not complex. They're not difficult to learn. But everybody wants to be like The Voice. And I think that is ridiculous, because there's other aspects of music. Like, the authenticity of music is not based around one musician. It's based around a group of musicians, of like a group or a band or a structure. It's not just one standalone musician. Like, it just drives me up the wall. I'm a little frustrated today, as people may be able to tell by what I'm saying online today, but I just like to lay it out there, you know. If people want to get to know more about me, they can watch my videos and either like it or don't like it, but I'm just laying it out there to other musicians in the world who want to know about me and know where I draw my influences. I draw a lot of influences from 60s and 70s rock and blues formation, and that's the basis of most music, you know. The basis of most music is blues music. It's not Cyndi Lauper or like Justin Bieber, you know. It's structured music with like composition, theory, timing, tempo. All that stuff goes into it. It's not difficult. Even if you were to teach anybody blues, you could play 3 notes, just 3 notes, and you could learn a blues song. It's not difficult. It's 3 chords, or excuse me, 3 chords or 3 notes, and you could play a blues song just simply in that regard. And it's just frustrating, you know. It's frustrating to a musician like me who's played for years and years and years, and I'm just getting really aggravated at all of the kids nowadays who emulate vocalists. There's other stuff in the world, you know. There's a bass, there's a drum in bands, there's a piano sometimes. There's like even background vocals. There's there's guitars, there's layered in guitars, there's layered in tracks. If you can get down to that basis as a musician, not necessarily just session, but even like practice all that track recording, it will take you miles in comparison to learning just voice. And I know that sounds funny because everybody watches that on TV. It gets millions of people on TV, but I think it's hilarious when I think about it. You know, I didn't want to be a vocalist when I was younger. When I was younger, I learned on the recorder. I learned on a recorder to start, and then we shifted over and I learned the trumpet. Those were the first two instruments I learned, was the recorder, which is like a flute, but a stand-up flute, and then trumpet. And those took me far. Like when I was in grade maybe 5 or 6, I was learning that stuff, and that's where I based most of my theory around. And then years later, I learned all of the structure of tablature and chord-related stuff on the guitar. And although I can use my voice, which I don't have any videos up of my voice yet, but although I can, I don't use that as an instrument for the basis of what I know. I use my own style, like behind my music, not my voice, because my voice is not a standout voice. And like 90% of people who try and sing are not standout voices. So singers beware, I guess is what you could say. The other thing is my influences are, when I practice, are based around about 10 different bands, and they're not like, it's not hard stuff to learn. It's just, if you get into it, you get into different layers of music, you get a little bit different feel for different styles, you get a little different approach to how you play. So there's stuff that pops up when I'm playing, like I'll be playing a melody on the guitar, and it will be like a variation of a Zeppelin song or something, or I'll be playing rhythm on the guitar, and it will be like a basis of a Pink Floyd song. So a lot of my style, guitar-wise, comes from that basis. Not copying bands like that, but just taking a little bit of what they write with and shifting it a little bit. You know, you can add a note here or like a bar there, or just change up the timing a bit on how you're playing, and it can be totally different. So there's bands like Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd that pop up into my style. There's stuff like the Beatles, of course. A lot of people, who doesn't draw influence from the Beatles, but a lot of the stuff that creeps into my style is related to some Beatles stuff. Or there's reggae related stuff too that I can play. So I can play a lot of Bob Marley's stuff, a lot of Peter Tosh, some Bunny Wailer stuff too. They're all like Bob Marley and the Wailers, basically, is what I know in that regard. And there's other bands too that I can think of that pop up, like Bob Dylan, Neil Young. I started learning Neil Young about, like, when I first started getting back into music 3 years ago. I started to learn all Neil Young stuff, and he's a powerful writer. You know, he sits down and he hammers out these really complex songs and makes them look very easy. he makes them look like they're easy songs to play when they're in actuality sometimes they're not. And Bob Dylan is one that I love a lot too. He's a poetic writer, so he writes a lot more complex lyricism than he does how he plays. But the way he structures everything, it's brilliant, you know. So you can take all these styles of music and just shift them around a bit, and it can formulate how you write. So you don't necessarily need to copy like Led Zeppelin, because not many people are like a Jimmy Page on the guitar, right? But just take it and make it your own, you know. That's what I love about music. You can take something that's, you know, really somebody else's and just make it your own. Not necessarily plagiarize it, but just shift it around a bit, and it can sound like something powerful that you have written. So that's what I think is lacking in the music nowadays. Everybody takes all these songs that used to be songs and smashes them together and makes them into like crappier versions of the original. So I don't like that when I see that, these smash up things they have on the internet, where they take a bunch of songs and smash them together and then write some stupid line over top of it. That's another thing that bugs me, you know, those smash up things on the internet. And but if you backtrack here, it's just taking something that you love or you draw an interest from and making it your own. You know, there's other bands too out there. There's like heavy metal bands, which I grew up listening to, or grunge. I was a big fan of grunge when I was younger, and that was the 90s, you know, like you couldn't go anywhere without hearing about the top 5 bands out of Seattle. And I read a couple of books over the last couple of weeks since I've been on here last, and some of the stuff in there, it's just wild to think of the scene out on the West Coast in the 90s. And that's something I draw a really big influence in. I draw a big influence in how bands like that came out of like almost nowhere, you know. They came out of like this whole impoverished part of the West Coast, and then they just like took over the scene, you know. That's what I'm kind of waiting for in the next big wave of musicians to take over in the world. And I think with Canada being a test ground for the legalization of marijuana, that'll probably happen again, you know. Like if you're going to have all these bands that are influenced by the culture that is surrounded in Canada, you're going to have a pretty good bunch of bands, I would think, in a couple years from now, whenever the legalization goes through. And that's kind of what the Seattle scene was like. You had these bands that were basically out of the counterculture, but the revisited counterculture that spawned all this great writing, you know. And I hate to say that, because there's probably kids out here watching this going, "Oh yeah, that's how you write good music." But that's not what I mean. I mean that you can draw influences from that kind of culture and that kind of tradition. You don't have to be strung out on on heavy drugs or anything. You just have to have a little bit of a creative method to your writing that sometimes you don't have when that kind of stuff is illegal. So, like the books I was reading on the internet were great. You know, there's stuff in there about the pioneers of punk, which I wouldn't quite classify my style as punk, but I do write some punk related things. So the books talked about the first groups that were out of Seattle that weren't even really like known, but they were the underground scene at the time that basically pushed ahead all this big wave of music. And I love to hear stories like that. I love to hear about the guys who were behind the scenes on all that. Because somewhere out there, there's like bands like this that are struggling to get by, playing crappy shows, slugging it out with their tour dates and just grinding it so that they can just get up and play. And I love that. Although I'm getting a bit old to be doing that. I'm getting a bit old to be grinding and pushing my body to the limits. But I do love to hear about scenes like that, and it gives me positive feedback whenever I can hear about stuff like that goes on before these big bands come in. Because I'm okay with the fact that I will probably never, well, definitely never make it big in a band, but it gives me a good feeling whenever I can hear about things like that. There's other books that I read about too, which talked about all the West Coast scene, and it's something I draw a big influence of, is the grunge scene in the 90s. It was a bit before my coming of age, but right around the time that grunge was ending was right around the time that I was just growing up as a kid, and I loved it. You know, I draw influence from bands like Alice in Chains, Nirvana, Soundgarden, Smashing Pumpkins, Blind Melon, all those bands, those big five bands, and Pearl Jam. Pearl Jam I wasn't into, I'll be honest. I wasn't into Pearl Jam as much. They were great. My brother loved them. Everybody I knew loved them. But it was just something I wasn't drawn to as much. I was more drawn to those dark, kind of haunting stoner lyrics and stoner songs. So that stuff is a big influence for me, and sometimes I write like that. Sometimes I'll write kind of heavier ballads and heavier writing. So I can thank my influence, I guess, in stuff like that, which is where my music comes out with that stylistic approach. I read another book about Chrissie Hynde, who was in a band called the Pretenders, and it was pretty neat too. It talked about where she grew up in Akron, Ohio, and it talked a bit about the Vietnam War and how they basically paved a highway over Akron, Ohio in the age that she grew up in, and now it's no longer the Akron that it used to be. See, there's stuff you can learn about when you're learning about music, just by osmosis. You know, I like learning about the history of the States is not something I go out of my way to study, but it definitely hits close to home whenever they talk about highways plowing over big cities and having all these musicians come out of nothing. They basically come out of these towns that are going down the tubes, and then somehow make it out of that. You know, that's like the dream, you know, of coming out of nothing and going somewhere. That was always a dream whenever I was younger, about coming out of being a little bit under the middle class and a little bit poorer than some families. I always wanted to make it as a musician because I thought that would take me out of my situation that I was in as a younger kid. There's other things that really bug me about music too, you know, like I talked about EDM. I talked about The Voice and vocal contests. I talked about pop music, and I don't really like to hit on this one, but there's the idea of rap and hip hop, right? like, it's not really my genre. I shouldn't go down these lines, but you know, I grew up listening to good rap when I was younger. Even though I'm not from like an inner city, or I'm not from a rough part of town, I grew up listening to good stuff. You know, it was the 90s. You know, the 90s were where it's at musically if you were to be involved in hip hop or rap, right? So what I'd like to say is that is a dangerous scene to be in now, you know? Like, I love music like that, but oh man, I would not wish my worst enemy to be good in a scene like that, you know? Because it just gets really violent. It gets blown way out of proportion. The ego clash thing happens, and then, you know, next thing you know, you have your two top artists in the 90s were gunned down, you know. That stuff that stuff scares me as a musician. That's another thing that scares me. Sometimes I get scared as a musician, you know, as much as I love my music, I get scared that like I can't do what I want to do for fear of some odd thing happening, you know. I shouldn't be afraid of that, but it scares me to think that there's musicians that are killing each other. There's fighting behind the scenes when you're touring with bands. There's like drug usage, people dying because of drug usage. There's people pulling guns on one another in the rap and hip hop scene. And that just blows my mind when I think about it, you know. People used to really take positive notes in the fact that they were musicians, you know. If you were a musician in the 70s and 60s, people would like commend you. They'd say, "Man, you know, that's a good thing. You're doing good for yourself. You're getting by, you know, you're trying to get out to the people, you're trying to do your craft." But nowadays, you know, people just beat you down because of that. They don't take the same honor involved with it. And I don't think you have to be all high end or anything with your honor, but you just have to kind of look around and go, "Hey man, this is cool. There's other people in the world who do this, and there's other people who can do this for a living." And you just never know about some people out there that make it big, and you never know also that people are too high end or something. You know, that high end thing is bad for music. You have the people who are built up really, really high as musicians, and then all they do is fall down this slippery slope. It's nice to know when people are really low leveled and then they work their way gradually up. You know, you can't have too high of expectations when you're in the music industry. That's for sure. In any case, I was on quite a rant tonight, but I just thought I'd tell the other people out there tonight that it's been 2 weeks and I decided to upload some more stuff. It's more content that doesn't have vocal tracks or anything. It's more just rhythms and structurally how I wrote. I sat down today and wrote a couple scores of music, and that's how the writing process is, you know. It's not every day that I sit down to write. It's about once every couple of weeks or something, right? So I'll try to do that again in the future, and please look out online and check my stuff out on YouTube, and you can check me out on Facebook too if you'd like, and I'll upload some more stuff in the future. Maybe a week to 2 weeks from now there'll be new content, and I thank everybody for their time, and all for now. Have a good Sunday evening, everybody, and take care.